Hello, good morning friends. Welcome back to your favorite channel Code One Digest. Today in this tutorial we will learn the server-side page fragment composition design pattern for microservices. Yes friend, I'll explain what is server-side page fragment composition design pattern, where to use it, and what are the advantages of using this design pattern. I'll give you the real world example of this design pattern. So stay tuned and watch this tutorial till end. It is going to be very exciting and informative tutorial. There is a lot to learn in this video. Friends, in the previous video, I discussed about backend for front-end design pattern. Do you know what is backend for front-end design pattern? Can you explain backend for front-end design pattern? Provide your answer in the comment section of this video. If you have not seen that tutorial, so please go and watch that video. Link is provided on your screen and also given in the description section of this video. For more information, go and watch the previous tutorial on Code1 Digest channel.
There's no agenda here.
Friends, here is the agenda of this video. I'll give you introduction of server-side page fragment composition design pattern. Then I'll explain you the real world example of this design pattern. I'll explain you how this design pattern works. What is the difference between server-side and client-side page fragment composition design pattern. We will understand the use cases of this design pattern, where to use it. We'll also understand the benefits and advantages of this design pattern. Then at the end, I'll summarize what we learned in this tutorial. So stay tuned and watch this tutorial till end. Friends, before we proceed in this video, I request you to subscribe this channel to grow Code One Digest family. Friends, I am creating a lot of quality videos on programming, coding concepts, design pattern and design principles, cloud and container technologies, but I'm not getting subscribers. I request you to like, share and subscribe this channel so that I can grow our Code One Digest family. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Okay friends, so now let's start with server-side page fragment composition design pattern for microservices. Server-side page fragment composition design pattern assembles the fragments on the server side. There are many customer-facing applications like B2C e-commerce websites, etc. developed using microservices. There are many screens or pages to display data from multiple services. Hence, server-side composition pattern suggests that UI fragments should be composed and assembled on the server side itself, which means the client side receives a fully assembled HTML page, resulting in the increased in loading time. Here, assembly of fragments are performed by a separate component located between the web browser and the web server. An example of such middleman is CDN, like Content Delivery Network, who sits between the client browser and the web server. Server-side page fragment pattern work closely with micro frontend pattern. Micro frontend is an architectural or organizational style. It is not a technology. In micro frontend, the frontend of an app is decomposed into individual loosely coupled micro apps that can be built, tested, and deployed independently. Just like in the world of microservices, where the backend is chopped into individual services. Okay, friends, so now let's understand how this pattern works. This pattern has a layout server and fragment service. A simple server-side composition is the combination of layout server and a fragment server. The fragment server here means the server that returns the fragment by each micro front-end team, and the layout server is the server-side application such as Rails, PHP, Node.js, etc. that assembles the fragment and return the final HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Let's consider the Node.js layout server with fragment server. For example, if there are two fragment server that you see in the first example, we have Node.js layout server with a fragment server, and there are two fragment servers, one exposing the React component and other is exposing a Vue component. The layout server can pass and assemble these two fragments. But what if your existing application is written in language other than the Node.js? In fact, this is the scenario in many of the cases. In this case, it is difficult to handle the framework specific fragment. So we will take an HTML string and assemble the fragments. So there are several frameworks that can do server-side composition with this pattern, including the open components, Podium, Puzzle.js, or Tailor libraries. Tailor is a more sophisticated layout server with some unique features in terms of assembling fragments. In Tailor library, each fragment is requested asynchronously and can be prioritized as primary async. Using a library like Tailor that focuses on a layout server functionality reduces the number of consideration on the part of micro frontend consumers. So if you see, we in the second example that we have a layout server and and a fragment server. Now we may have multiple fragment servers based on technology. Maybe one is running on Node.js and other is running on a Vue.js. And both we are consolidating in layout server. But what if there are two different technologies involved, then layout server will not be able to assemble it. Hence, what we say is both the fragment server should give me HTML as a HTML string, and my layout server will work purely on assembling the HTML fragments. Right, friends? So this is the logic behind server-side UI composition design pattern. Layout server consolidate all the HTML fragments from multiple sources and sends a complete page to the client so that we'll have a faster page loading. Okay, friend, now let's look at the example of Instagram web page to understand this pattern. Let's take an example of profile page. We see so many different information on this profile page like navigation, header, footer, saved stories, and post, etc. Instagram page is built using separate fragments like navigation bar, header, footer, etc. Generally, things like header and footer are typical target for the micro frontends. Next, it's a block with the saved stories, and finally, the block with the post can be developed as a separate service. All these blocks or fragments are stitched together, assembled together by a layout server to form a complete page for the client request. Right, friends? So you have seen the whole page is divided into multiple fragments, and the layout server integrates all these fragments into one page and send it back to the customer. And Instagram is adopting this technology. Instagram is using this pattern. We also call it server-side rendering concept. So it is using server-side rendering to create this page, and server-side UI composition internally based on server-side rendering concept. Now let's understand this pattern with another example of Spotify audio streaming platform. Spotify, a huge audio streaming company, has been one of the early adopter of micro front-end architecture or server-side rendering technology. It organizes its development in autonomous end-to-end teams called squads. Their design and approach is based on server-side rendering. Server-side rendering is where your site's contents is rendered on the web server rather than the browser. The server prepare an HTML file with user-specific data and send it to the user's machine. The browser then interpret the content and display the page, giving the user a fully rendered HTML page without waiting for JavaScript or CSS file to load. This method is favorable for the SEO compared to client-side rendering because sometimes the JavaScript and CSS file takes a lot of time to download. That hampers the indexing from a search engine. Many popular JavaScript framework including Angular and React uses server-side rendering. Also social media giants such as Facebook and Twitter using the server-side rendering before the page is sent to the user. Right, friends?
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Okay, friends, so now let's understand the client-side rendering versus server-side rendering. So if you see on your left-hand side image where you have different teams who is responsible for different fragments and services, the client browser is calling all the services and the composition, the assembly is happening on the client side. Now, if you see on the right-hand side, you have one intermediate component sitting between the client browser and the services. And the purpose of this intermediate component to assemble all the fragments into one page and then send that complete page to the customer. This composition server-side rendering component calling all the services, getting the fragment A, fragment B, and fragment C, forming the complete page, and then sending it back to the client. Now this component can be Nginx web server or load balancer or a CDN server. Right friends? Now I hope you are clear the difference between the client side UI composition and the server side UI composition.
What? I do not understand.
Okay friends, so now let's see some of the use cases of this design pattern. So you can use server side UI composition design pattern to achieve server side rendering. Whenever you have a requirement for having a server side rendering in a specific website, then you can go for this pattern. Use this pattern when you want to send the whole page as a single response to the client instead of sending the fragment by fragment information. Use this pattern for the faster loading, faster page load time. Most of the static websites are based on server-side rendering concept. Okay friends, so now let's see some of the advantages of this design pattern. This pattern provides you a server-side rendering capabilities. This pattern divides your complex layout into small fragment, and this fragment will have their own code bases with smaller in size and more manageable. And very few developers required to manage these specific UI components, UI fragments. This simplifies your code review and maintainability. Server-side rendering and their pattern is also good for the SEO. So this pattern is useful for the SEO concept. Okay friends, now let me summarize what we learned in this video today. I gave you introduction of server-side page fragment composition design pattern. Then I gave you real world example of server-side page fragment composition design pattern. I shown you example of Spotify and also Instagram pages, how the fragments are assembled at server side to form a page. Then I explained you how the server side rendering works. What is the difference between the client side UI composition and server side UI composition? I explained you that. Then we understood what is the use cases of server side page fragment composition design pattern. Then I explained you the benefits of server-side rendering and server-side page composition design pattern. Right, friends? So let me know if you have already used this design pattern in your project or seen a scenario where this pattern can be useful. So provide your answer in the comment section of this video.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Good plan. Good talk, all right?
Friends, in the next video, I'll explain you what is microfragment design pattern. I'll show you the real world example of microfragment design pattern. I'll explain you the use cases of microfragment design pattern, and then I'll also tell you the advantages of using microfragment design pattern. We'll understand the scenario where microfragment design pattern is very useful. So stay tuned for the next video and keep watching Code One Digest. If you are new to the channel, so do subscribe to our channel to grow Code One Digest family. Thank you. Friends, if you like this video, so give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for the more interesting videos. Click on the bell icon for the latest video notifications and do not forget to share this video with all your friends and colleagues. This is very useful information for students, beginners and software engineers. I am putting a lot of efforts in creating these contents. So please help me growing the Code One Digest family. Please subscribe to Code One Digest channel for the latest programming and technology related videos. Thank you.